Good evening, everyone. Wow, usually it takes more than one good evening. We are so glad that you are here. My name is Dr. David Holmes. I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the Dean for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and we welcome you to this very special occasion with a very special speaker. This is a part of the McClure Lecture Series, and in a moment we're going to have the McClure Professor of Faith and Science come before you to introduce our guest speaker. We want you to know that we are in a time where folks seem to dichotomize ideas that originally were meant to go together. Folks divide according to many lines, politically, racially, culturally, and even ideologically they divide. But we understand and we believe in this center, the McClure Faith and Science Center, that faith and science do not oppose one another. They are in a very productive tension and conversation with one another. They complement each other. And so tonight you're going to get an example of that from our speaker. In a moment I'm going to ask Dr. John Lewis, the McClure Faith and Science Professor, to introduce our speaker, but I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the couple for whom this center is named. They don't like to be introduced, but we're going to introduce them anyway, and of course being the dean does have some of its privileges. So I would like for Dr. and Mrs. McClure to please stand. They exemplify this conversation I'm talking about between ideas that people say are oppositional. Dr. McClure is a medical doctor who had a midlife crisis and went back to get a master's of divinity. And he can tell you that these things are not contradictory. That is science and faith, but very complementary. So without any further ado, I'm going to have Dr. John Lewis, who is promoted now to Professor of Biology. And congratulations on that. And he is the McClure Professor of Faith and Science. He's going to introduce our guest. Let's welcome Dr. Lewis.
I didn't know that was official, David, but thank you. So I'm happy to introduce April Cordero. April is the Dean for Instructional Effectiveness at Point Loma Nazarene University out in beautiful San Diego. Dr. Ellis and I were there last summer for the American Scientific Affiliations meeting, and it's a great campus. We have a beautiful campus. Their baseball field overlooks the Pacific Ocean, so you can hit homers like out onto the beach. So you work in a nice place. I first came to know April by going to BioLogos meetings and American Scientific Affiliation meetings, and have always enjoyed listening to her. She's a very gifted speaker. She's also a professor of biology, and her areas of emphasis have included ecology and evolutionary biology. And she's done a lot of work on what our center hopes to do, which is integrate faith and science for students, for people in the community, for people in churches, and for people who choose science as a discipline. She's recently wrote a book called What About Evolution? A biologist, pastor, and theologian answer your questions. I think you have a few copies if people are interested, and I'll let you plug that more. But what an interesting way to approach this problem. Bringing together people who know the science, which was April in this case, and people who pastor to our Christian brothers and sisters, and theologians who think about their faith and the Bible in a very serious way. One quote I'd like to pull from April's section of the book that I think exemplifies her attitude. And this book has like several different little questions that set up parts of the book. This one says, does evolution show me things that make a difference for how we should understand God or God's creation? And April says, definitely. My view of who God is expands with each new scientific finding I learn about. So much of what science has discovered, from the intricate details of human development to the enormity of the universe confirms for me the magnitude of God's creativity and power. And I would echo that and invite you to welcome April Cordero. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm going to move this. I have notes to keep me on track so I don't go on these little rabbit trails, but I'm going to be kind of using a lot of space. I tend to walk and talk and all that. So thanks so much for inviting me here. I'm excited. Oh, I forgot my little clicker. To share with you guys, and I look forward to some Q&A at the end. But I want to tell you a little bit about me. I always feel like it's kind of important for you to know who I am. Before I even do that, can we pray? Heavenly Lord, thank you. Thank you for an opportunity to talk about science and faith. Thank you for a beautiful day. Thank you for an opportunity to learn in an institution like this. Thank you for the gifts. Thank you for your son. We should invite your presence in here so that we can all feel you speaking to us, Lord, that the words I say aren't what they hear, but they hear what you want them to hear. That's what I ask for always. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for being in here. In Jesus' name, amen. Yeah, I always God is present. We just want to make sure that we're feeling that, because I talk about some controversial topics, and sometimes that can be difficult. But back to me, and tell you a little bit about me. Upper left, those are my two sons, 28 and 29. They're both married, so I'm a mom. I'm also a daughter. It's a picture of my mom and dad, both still alive in their 80s. I have a great relationship with them. There's a picture of me and my husband, very happily married. Lots of big smiles there. That's my students. We went to Los Angeles Museum of History. We have a science and religion club at Point Loma, and so we're always kind of trying to do fun stuff. But most importantly, I'm a Christian, and that's a huge part of my identity. And what that means is that I identify Jesus as my Savior and Bible as revelation. And so I ground everything in that, because as we talk about various things, usually with my students, I have time for them to get to know me over the semester, and they don't doubt my faith. But sometimes when we talk about controversial issues and you don't know me, then I become the other. So you got your in-group here, and I'm an other over there, and then you can just discount me. So I really want you to know that my faith is primary in my life. And that doesn't mean I don't have doubt. I think that means you have a faith, is because you also have doubt, and doubt's very healthy. But let's get into this. So how is it that I came to be a speaker about evolution and faith? Well, I had a very long and interesting journey reconciling evolution with my faith. So I was a person in Young Life in high school. Any Young Lifers out there? Do you guys even know what it is? It's a youth group. High school, okay. All right, I got one. I got Brian up here raising his hand and nobody else. So I grew up, I went to Young Life, and that's where I really learned what it meant to be a Christian, kind of have a relationship, have a Bible. It was my first Bible, was Young Life. And I never once thought about evolution. I didn't learn about it in high school. It didn't come up at all. So I go off to college. I'm a journalism major when I start college. And when you first start college, as you guys know, you get your schedule, and they tell you what you're taking as a freshman. You don't get any options. And they stuck me in a gen ed biology class. And I can still remember Dr. Mills. He was a vegetarian, and he would walk back and forth in class talking like this, eating out of a baggie of raw almonds and telling us how amazing the body is and how it uses food and digestion. And I sat there like the whole time, because I hated science in high school, which you kind of laugh, right? So I signed up for a second GE bio class, my second quad at UC San Diego, because I thought bio was so cool. Still a journalism major, but halfway through the class, I switched over and became a biology major. And it's actually in that same course, that second quad of my freshman year, the biology professor, I don't even remember how the topic came up, because I believe it was molecular bio, but he says, you can't accept evolution and be a person of faith, believe in God. I was like, huh? I hadn't heard that from anybody before. He says, yeah, evolution proves that there's no God, and you got to choose. And that, it bugged me. And I had two pastors I knew, the church I'd been going to at that time at college, and also my youth group pastor. So I met with both of them, I talked with both of them, and I said, he told me I got to pick evolution or faith. Is that true? Both of them said yes. You got to choose evolution or faith. It bothered me. And about a year later, I'm still taking biology classes now, I'm a biology major, and there's more and more evidence for evolution. And so at some point, I don't know exactly when, I'm guessing probably around my junior year, I said, fine. You tell me I have to choose, that they're mutually exclusive, evolution or faith. Evolution's obviously true, so you know what? Faith, out the door. Became an atheist. In fact, I became a little grumbly atheist, sort of like if you're a person that has faith, it's because you're needy and you're not strong enough to be without a faith. I became one of those. And I gave up my faith completely. Graduated with my bachelor's in biology, got a job in a lab. Life goes on. It's a year after college. And I am in need of a change. I'm in a not very good relationship. I don't like my job in the lab at all. And I open the newspaper, and it says this for reals. It says, do you have a bachelor's degree? And I think, yes, I do. Do you need a life adventure? Absolutely. Come teach English in Japan. 3 weeks later, I'm on a plane. No kidding. Somebody had left, and they needed me to fill a job, and boom, I fly and I go live in Japan. I don't speak a word of Japanese. I don't read Japanese. Okay, so I find myself in the middle of nowhere, Japan. Niigata, Japan, all the way north, and they tell me before I go, mail yourself some books. So I mailed two big boxes of books to Japan. There's nothing to do when I'm not working. There are 3 people in my community, that was 3, I pulled up 2 fingers. There's 3 people in my community that speak English. And the one guy, he didn't want to hang out with Americans, that's why he lived in Japan. So he wasn't going to be communicative with me. There was no radio in English. This is 1989. There was no internet. There was no cell phones. There was no TV in English except Knight Rider. If you're old enough to know Knight Rider, is that talking car, Kit the talking car, yes. So Knight Rider was in English with Japanese subtitles. Sunday at 2 o'clock, and I lived for Sunday at 2 o'clock so I could watch Knight Rider. This was my life in Japan. So I went through those 2 boxes of books so fast. The bottom of the second box was a Bible. I am an atheist. I don't own a Bible. Bottom of the second box is a Bible. My sister says she didn't put it in there. I still suspect her, but she says she didn't put it in there. So I open the Bible. I have nothing to do. You can only take so many walks. Open up the Bible. I start reading, page 1. Very difficult to start reading the Bible from page 1. And you're marching through the who begot who's, and then it feels like God's just killing people, and then there's these wars, and then there's these rules about you need 3 purple buttons on the left side of the drape, and I don't even know what I'm reading in this Bible, right? It's just so confusing. So I start writing letters to my sister, okay? If you're under 40 in here, 1989, no internet, snail mail, Japan to San Diego, okay? The stamp, the boat, the whole thing, whatever. So I write letters with questions. She had maintained her faith, and she's brilliant. And so, writer, why this? Why that? Why is he killing this person? Why does it matter? Blah, blah, blah. She answers. I keep reading. We go back and forth, back and forth. At some point while I'm in Japan, and I can't pinpoint exactly when, I decided I'm going to become a Christ follower. I'm doing this. This thing is real. And shortly thereafter, I come back home. So now, back in San Diego, and I'm hiding my Christian faith from all the people at my science job. And I'm hiding that I'm a biologist from all the people at my church. Because people are saying they're mutually exclusive. And no one will really engage in a conversation with me. So during the 1990s, I'm going to move here. During the 1990s, I had to spend a whole lot of time figuring out, how do I reconcile what I accept in the Bible, what I accept about the science with evolution, and then my faith. It all just seemed very difficult for me. And what I was able to do was love the Lord with my heart and my soul and my strength. But I couldn't love the Lord with my mind. That became the stumbling block. And it took me a decade. And back in the 90s, like now I would just go on Google, I'd look up books. There's so much you can do now that just seems so much more complicated back then. The books were very dense theology, difficult stuff. But around it was about 2000, a book came out by Daryl Falk, Coming to Peace with Science. And he wrote for the lay audience, the regular non-theologian person like me. And it was like, oh my gosh, this person speaks my language. They're talking about integrate science with faith. And it was so heartwarming to know that I didn't get my theology too screwed up. I didn't do too bad with making up my own theology until I, read more and more books that were coming out in the early 2000s. There was a book called The Four Views, if anyone in the room read that one. I think that was in 1999. It really helped me to learn some specific techniques to integrate or help me to kind of use my mind to love the Lord, help me to integrate my science with my faith. So one of the things was to realize that different books of the Bible are written at different times for different groups of people. It's not all written to one audience. So when you view a book within its context, the messages from the books are so much more beautiful and profound if you take them in context. So I came to realize that I needed to take the Bible on its own terms and not force it to answer questions it wasn't intended to answer. And so that allowed me to take science on its own terms, and I was able to reconcile them. So I'm going to kind of get into that a little bit more and what I've learned in the last 25 years as I've done that. But where am I now? Well, yeah, there's that beautiful Pacific Ocean. I actually have an office that looks out at the ocean. I just got the office in August, and sometimes I just sit there like this, because it is stunningly beautiful and sunny almost every day. So I really do live in paradise. And what I've gotten to do the last 16 years is teach students about evolution and ecology. And it's been a journey. Most of my students, the freshmen, it's a freshman course called Ecology and Evolution that I'll speak a lot about. But most of my students, almost all, 98% of them identify as Christians, and a lot of them came from non-denominational churches. And they were told exactly the same thing that I heard. Nope, evolution or faith, you can't have it both ways. You have to choose. And I always do a hand raise, and you would think over the years there'd be less and less. There's a few less people. How many people in the room heard that? In high school and junior high, evolution and faith are not compatible. Okay, so we got people in the room as well, right? So this is still a message out there. And the thing about doing that is forcing a choice, like I was confronted with and some of you may have been confronted with, it's unnecessary. And what happens when we do that is we cause people to have a faith crisis, just like I did. You force people to choose one or the other. And this is problematic because a lot of people, when they look at the evidence for evolution, are going to drop their faith. And I spoke in Oklahoma City recently. And after a talk like this, the student came up to me at the end and he said, can we get coffee? I said, sure. So the next day we met for coffee and he proceeded to tell me his story. And in short, his story was that his church and his parents would not engage in conversations with him about evolution at all. But he was a biology major and he'd been learning about evolution. And he said, in fact, that he felt, I want to use his words because I wrote them down after our talk, and I don't want to misrepresent him. He felt that his parents and his church were being closed-minded and untrustworthy, bordering on deception. Ooh, his words. I think I'm being deceived. And so he decided he's going to reject Christianity. What's interesting is he was talking to me about it instead of just rejecting it. He was looking for some answer, right? So I knew a couple people at the school, and I connected him to a group that met for a Bible study. And a year later, he sent me an email, and he said, I want to thank you for connecting me to so-and-so. We meet weekly, and I'm still a believer. I'm still confused, and I haven't got it all figured out, but I'm still a believer. So a lot of people can work through it if we can just be engaging in conversations. This particular young man is not unique. A lot of you guys out there are probably in your early, mid-20s. So you are the audience that this book was written on back in 16. You were young in your teens. More than a third of teens feel that they can't ask their most pressing questions in church. Ooh, isn't that the place we're supposed to be asking our most pressing questions? The hardest questions? Church is the place to ask those. They felt like they can't ask them. Only 28% of all teens believe science and the Bible are complementary. Wow, does that hit me in the gut? 49% of church-going teens perceive that the church seems to reject much of what science tells us about the world. We need to work on the churches, don't we? 1 in 4 young people who leave the church feel Christianity is anti-science. Wow. This is putting a heavy, heavy burden on youth. And maybe on you, if you're still in this experience. And that's just not okay. Forcing you to try to decide between well-confirmed science and faith in Christ isn't fair. And so we owe it to you. If you're one of these people in their 20s, we owe it to you to engage in this dialogue with you. At least answer the questions. It doesn't mean you have to accept something, but it means we can talk about it, right? So, when I was invited here, I was asked to, not to give you evidence for evolution, this is not a science class, but sort of to talk about this journey and my experiences over the last 25 years, talking about evolution and faith with people. And if we have some time at the end, we'll hit environmental care a little bit. But I've learned a lot. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about engaging in evolution conversations, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, I won't preview it for you. How's that? What I've learned is that let's listen and not just draw lines right off the bat and say, you're not a Christian because fill in the blank. And I can't tell you how many times I've been told I'm not a Christian. More than I can count. I've been yelled at, promoting Satan's agenda. I'm just trying to do the best I can with my science mind and my belief in my faith and the Bible. So, talking to people about evolution. Let's start there. There's a couple of misunderstandings that are huge. The first one is a common misunderstanding that evolution means exactly what my biology professor told me, that it proves that there's no creator. Evolution says nothing about a creator. Whether there is one or isn't one, it is neutral on that topic. Evolution is actually an explanation for the incredible diversity of species we have on Earth. If you just think about it, look around. Think about animals. Think about Dr. Lewis's class. What do you teach? What's that? Ornithology? No, you have another one. Like all mammals or something, large vertebrate mammals or... There is so many vertebrates out there. And we're not even touching on the fungi and the plants and the animals. The biodiversity is spectacular and fun and exciting to learn about. So what we have here is evolution is providing a mechanism. It's the how. It's not the agent. An agent is the what? God. We can all agree in this room, God created. We come to the table with the same agreement. And now we can haggle over how God created. You think he created in 6 days, the seventh day of rest. You think you're older, you're younger. I think he created long time. God's still the agent. And it's okay to accept a mechanism of creation and maintain your faith that there is a creator. Okay, so you can't get those two things mixed up. Another misunderstanding is the consensus among scientists about evolution. 98% of professional biologists affirm the evolution of all life on Earth. In 2018, I did a talk at Urbana. Did anyone ever go to Urbana? Heard of it? Okay, Urbana is a conference for 18 to 25-year-olds that are interested in missionary work. And I think they do the Urbana conference every 2 years. It's huge. Thousands, 10,000, 11,000, 13,000 people go to Urbana. And we did a talk at Urbana. We had a couple hundred students in the room. I did the talk with a philosopher. And we asked the question. We asked a variety of questions, and we had them use their phones and provide an answer. How many believed biologists agree that evolution is the mechanism for life on Earth? More than 70% said that the scientists don't agree. 70% of these 18 to 25-year-olds said the scientists don't agree that evolution is the mechanism. But 98% of the scientists do agree. So there's some weird message going around, right? Like there's something funky happening there. Because we have agreement among the scientists, but people think the scientists aren't agreeing. So this is an issue. We have hundreds and thousands of articles in the scientific community that support evolution, from genetics, embryology, biogeography, paleontology, geochemistry, physiology, anthropology, molecular biology, biochemistry, and I'm sure the scientists in the room could yell out a few more, that all support evolution as the explanation. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about how science works. Hang on, let me look. Okay, I'm gonna tell you a little bit how science works. There's an ongoing explanation for how we make sense of something. If a scientist can do research and prove that to be wrong, that's huge. This is how you get more money. This is how you get awards, right? This is how you make a big name for yourself. And you did something unique and novel and huge. So if we had strong evidence to show that evolution is not a good explanation for the biodiversity of life on Earth, it would be huge news. It would be giant. We're not finding that. The more we do in genetics, the more fossils we find. I don't care what you do, the more things lead to and support exactly what we predicted they would. Now, does that mean we all agree on everything? No. I'll give you an example. This one's a little bit old, but who's heard of the hippo and the whale argument? Probably some of the biologists in the room, right? So it was like, who's most closely related? I'm in the creation mode, right? Who's most closely related to the whale so that we can better understand the evolution of the whale, right? Was it the pig or the hippo? And it's going back and forth and arguing. There was like 10 years worth of papers on this, and all these people are giving information. Who's most closely related? They landed on the hippo, thus Whippo. All I'm saying is nobody in those arguments was saying that evolution is not the explanation for the biodiversity or how we have whales. They're just arguing about the details, the periphery of it. Okay, so it's really important to understand what biology is about, how biologists would have grants, money, fame. It's not a little disagreement here or there that's causing any issues. There is strong consensus. So evolution itself is not going away. We can't just, let's just not teach it in the schools because it's controversial. Let's just not talk about it. In the next 10 years, we're going to see it more than ever. So let's look at a few things. Something called evolutionary medicine. I'm going to stick to my notes a little bit here because I can go on long tangents, and I don't want to do that to you. So it means using the basic science of evolutionary biology to find ways to treat disease or to use its studies of disease to advance basic evolutionary knowledge. So they ask questions like, why do we have wisdom teeth? Why do we get clogged arteries? We being us humans. Why do women have a narrow birth canal? It's very inconvenient, I can tell you that. Why does where our food goes down and our windpipe cross over and have the same, the choking issue? Why does that happen? So it also asks ailments like back pain. And why has back pain been a problem for hominids since we've been up on two legs? And so it explains the traits that cause us to be vulnerable to disease and other physiological challenges we have as Homo sapiens, and that's really important to us. If you've ever had back pain, you care, and you care to understand it. So another thing that is relevant for evolution, and we're going to see more and more and more of, I could have written the word COVID up here. We have I went back and forth, I vacillated back and forth, but superbugs have been around even longer. So, you've heard about these people, they go to the hospital because they have some bacterial infection, and they give them antibiotic A, it doesn't work, they give them antibiotic B, they give you antibiotic C, they give you antibiotic D, it's not working, the superbug, you heard these terrifying, right? The flesh-eating disease, right? We hear these things that are scary, right? This is because of evolution is able to explain this. We kill off some of the bacteria, we leave alive some of the bacteria that are antibiotic resistant. Those ones are the ones that reproduce, pass on that resistant gene to the next one, and next thing you know, we've got these terrifying bacteria that we can't seem to get rid of. Or COVID. Okay, so we got a shot for COVID. You go get your vaccine. Well, why do I have to go get another vaccine? And I got to go get another vaccine. Well, why? Why do you get your flu shot every year, right? These are things that evolution helps us to understand. What's surviving, what's changing, why is it changing, what's influencing the change. Third example of where evolution's not going anywhere. Yeah, we're kind of doing some stuff to the earth, and we don't actually know the impact. So if we're going to think about evolution and animals on earth and plants on earth, been here a really long time. So 3.8 billion years for life on Earth, something like that, right? So had a long time to adapt to the way it was. And we came in pretty much Industrial Revolution, so a couple hundred years ago, and we said, we're going to change it up. And so now we've got all kinds of ecologists and other people looking at communities of plants, animals, fungi. We got other scientists looking at the air. How are these things impacting animals and plants in the community? So the bottom line of all this is evolution isn't going anywhere. It's here to stay. So what are we going to do about that? Instead of avoiding it, because it's a hot topic and we don't want to get into the conversation, maybe we should just start dialoguing about it and figuring out what about it scares us. So I can tell you what about it scares us. What do we do about the Bible? So I talked about evolution. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bible. So what do we do about the Bible? Well, I really like the way, his name just escaped me, Brad Kelly. He's an Old Testament scholar. I really like the way he talks about it. He wants to respect the Bible as the Word of God while making space for the context with which it's in. So let's come to an agreement, right? So we see the Bible as the canonical books of the Old and New Testament, divinely inspired, and revealing the will of God concerning all things for our salvation. So if we agree on that, now we can say, okay, that's agreed upon. Are we trying to make the Bible do more than that? Are we trying to make the Bible be a science book? So how about Genesis 1 and 2? What's the message Genesis 1 and 2 is trying to convey? So Brad Kelly tells us we need a shift in our thinking. Instead of saying, what does Genesis 1 and 2 have to do with science? Which we hear that all the time, right? Well, how does it connect to science? He's like, stop it. What does Genesis 1 and 2 have to do with? What does it have to do with? What is it about? What is the message Genesis 1 and 2 is trying to convey? And figuring that out for the people with whom it's written to at the time. So, what was the genre of the biblical creation stories? Are they meant to be a scientific account? What is the function of ancient origin texts? What are they meant to do? And what is the Bible for? What is Scripture's inspired function? So we shouldn't expect the Bible to speak authoritatively about geology or geography or biology or plants or animals, because that was not its function when and to whom it was written. It was written to a different audience for a different purpose. Scripture tells us about who God is and God's relationship to us. It doesn't tell us the how of creation. So, a little bit of biology, evolution, a little bit of the Bible, and the big elephant in the room, anxiety and fear. So you bring up evolution. Some people will want to get up and leave the room. Some people's heart rates go up. You bring up interpretation of the Bible. The other people, their heart rate goes up and they want to leave the room, right? So these are two really difficult things to try to bring together. What I've learned over the last 25 years, and some of it I've learned in a very difficult way, is we need to bring up the fact that there's anxiety and fear right off the bat. So I led this Bible study. This was probably 8 years ago. I wanted to use this book, that book, in a Bible study at my church. We're going to meet weekly. Our church was big on small groups. Everybody was involved in a small group. So I asked the pastor, can I do a small group on evolution and faith stuff? Yeah, we're going to use this book. It's a great book, by the way. And about 14 people came to this Bible study, this small group. I'll call it a small group. And we're reading week 1. We read a chapter a week. Week 1, we get to know each other. Week 2, chapter 1. Week 3, chapter 2, right? Week 4, I'll call him Tom. I don't remember his name. I should. Tom didn't come. Okay, yeah, no problem. Week 5, Tom's not there. Week 6, and I'm trying to call Tom. I tried to email Tom. Hey, we miss you. Small group. Where are you? Right? Trying to do the right thing. I finally find him at church. It was week 7. And you shouldn't really do this to people, but I kind of cornered him. Hey, Tom, you're not at our Bible study anymore, or a small group. Where'd you go? I was much nicer about it than that. And he basically looked at me with this sort of almost terrified look on his face, and he said, I just can't read about evolution anymore. I just can't do it. And I felt horrible. I was like, what did I do? And what I realized in the conversation that we had and thinking about it for about 2 years after that, nonstop, that I might be hurting somebody's faith, was he wasn't ready with his faith to engage in the really hard questions. His faith pivoted on the fact that if evolution ended up being true, there might not be anything left over here with his faith, because everything was sort of pivotal on that piece. And he had a ton of fear and anxiety about that. And I didn't bring that up and make that part of the conversation early on, that this stuff can be really traumatic for some people, for whatever personal reasons they have for that. So, you do a lot of learning when you engage in these conversations. So bringing up anxiety and fear. The other piece is the slippery slope. You guys heard the slippery slope, right? Well, if you don't interpret Genesis 1 and 2 this way, it's a slippery slope to just giving up the whole Bible. It's no good. If you can't take the first book of the Bible literally, then you can't take any of it. And that's actually based on fear. There are hundreds, probably thousands of biblical scholars and theologians who don't see Genesis 1 and 2 as a scientific text, and they have an incredibly beautiful, strong faith. Not to mention probably millions of people in the world who aren't biblical scholars and theologians who accept the science, don't see Genesis 1 and 2 in a particular way, and haven't lost their faith. So I did a study in my class. I needed to know. I had various provosts from Christian colleges coming to me and saying, you're teaching about evolution, you're going to ruin people's faith. And I'm like, I'm not ruining their faith. Well, do you have any evidence? No, I don't. So I'm a scientist, and I want to collect some evidence. So I'm part of 2 different studies where we collected evidence. We taught evolution. We did a religion survey, and kind of how strong is your faith, how much you pray, how often you go to church, those kinds of things. What is your belief? Then did that first day of class, taught evolution for 15 weeks, did the survey at the end. In my class, faith went up. It didn't stay the same. It didn't decline at all, like everybody was afraid it was going to go down. It went up. And in the other class, the other person taught, it stayed exactly the same. So no, learning about evolution, even accepting evolution, because acceptance of evolution did increase, didn't have to lose the faith, especially when you allow people to find ways to reconcile it with their faith. I was there. Bottom line for that is we need to be aware anxiety and fear are part of these conversations. The fear is real, and we need to be careful of that. So if you are feeling that fear, nobody, including me, is saying you must accept evolution. It's the only way you can be a good Christian. And I'm also not saying you have to reject evolution. It's the only way to be a good Christian. Is that we just need to expand our view and say, you know what, there's Christians that hold these different viewpoints. There are multiple ways that different Christians believe. And let's leave space for that. And if we can leave that space, sometimes it takes away some of that fear that I'm not trying to change your mind. I just want you to understand my mind. I want you to understand how I can be a person who accepts evolution, including humans. And I love the Lord. And pray and believe and wrestle with and argue with and worship. And to not be accused of not being a Christian. This is a Biologos website. Biologos is an organization that deals, mostly started with evolution and faith, but now they deal with a couple of other topics as well, caring for creation. And here's another book about people talking about how they changed their mind about evolution. So if this is something that you'd be interested in, I have a list of resources at the end that I'll put up there so you can take a picture of it if you want. But you can learn from other people and in those kinds of things. So where am I at? I ascribe to, I don't know how I assign myself this title. I hate boxing myself in, but I would say at the moment, and I'm going to say at the moment because you never know, right? I'm an evolutionary creationist. And that means I accept mainstream consensus science, all the things that the National Academy of Sciences and, all the AAAS, Greg, help me out here. Academy of the Advancement of Science, Association of the Advancement of the Academy of Scientists, whatever it is. Right? Where do they stand on the science? What's the best knowledge that we can have in the world right now about science? I accept that, and I accept that evolution is the best explanation, and I believe in God. It's called evolutionary creation. And I would tell you more exactly what Dr. Lewis shared at the beginning is that the part he read out of my book is exactly sort of what I have in here. For those of us that are evolutionary creationists, there's so much awe and wonder and beauty and wow in all the things that we study because it makes you realize how huge God is. God burst out of the box that I had put God in of how God had to do things. And I think, gosh, I can't even put on a really good birthday party. And God could evolve all these plants, animals, the biodiversity on Earth over long periods of time. It's spectacular. And so my view of God is much bigger. So we learned a little bit about kind of evolution itself. We learned a little bit about thinking about the Bible. We talked about the issue of fear. But evolution isn't the only science and faith topic. So I want to give you guys 2 minutes. Oh, this is my list of books. These are suggested books. The one on top is mine. These are all really great books. I've read all of them. And then it says The Lost World in that little box there because he's got a Lost World of. He's The Lost World of Genesis 1, which was great. I love John. It's very long. I got into a lot of detail. So I kind of started giving up about 2/3 of the way in, I have to admit. But then I read The Lost World of Adam and Eve, and I thought it was fantastic all the way through. So if you only have energy for one, I go for that one. So these are some books that have to do with that. What do we do about environmental care? So this is also an issue for Christians. This is a problem. Why the resistance? I want you guys to talk to your neighbor for 2 minutes. For the Christian community, why is there resistance about environmental care? What are all the things you can come up with? Go, talk to your neighbor, 2 minutes. I'm going to talk to John over here. Hello? Oh, there you are. Do you have some ideas? Somebody give me an idea. Why the resistance? It's not reading Genesis 1 or 2. We know that. It doesn't seem to be a Bible issue. So why the resistance? Come on. Why the resistance? Yeah, yell something out. It's all going to be just ruined, gone, evaporates. We might as well ruin it ourselves. Exactly. Yes. Nice and loud. Use your outside voice. Yeah, so we're allowed to have dominion, and if we really thrash it, God's going to show up and fix it. What else? Oh, there's more. That's all we got? Those two? Right over there. Yeah, this is hard to do. This is not comfortable. Meat. You want me to eat meat only red meat twice a week? It would make huge amount of differences if we ate red meat only twice a week. A lot of people eat it twice a day. Bacon, sausage, your hamburger, right? Twice a week. I don't want to only eat red meat twice a week. I love my burgers, right? Like, I'm with you there. I get it. What else? There's more. Yeah. Thank you. In group. You got it. I'm going to tell that in a minute. Yes, what were you going to say? It's been that way forever. We're just going to keep doing it that way. So these are all issues that come up. In-group dynamics has to do with we as humans, psychologists and sociologists have figured this out. We create an in-group of people that are our people. And we are us, and everyone else is an other. And we get to be critical of the other. And so what happens when you're in a group that is sort of, caring for creation is tree hugging, and you want to hug trees and you want to kill babies. And it's all blended together in this giant narrative that's completely wrong, right? Well, if I show up and I decide I really want to care about the environment, I don't fit in my in-group anymore. There is a lot of anxiety when you're going to be the oddball out in your in-group. A lot of anxiety. So when we were just talking about that with a professor whom I won't name at another university, you said that might actually be okay with evolution, but he's got his in-group, right? Yeah. So these are all things that happen. Politics. The fixer, God's the fixer, is going to come and fix it all, like they said. It's inconvenient. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it, right? Dominion is something that we have. So I read a paper in the Biologos article, blog, whatever they call it now. If you're interested in actually this, if this is an field of yours that you're interested in, caring for the environment, I would recommend reading it because I looked at a lot of the research in psychology and sociology about what are some best ways to sort of engage in this dialogue? First, tell a story. I told you my story when I started today of how I became an atheist and then came back to Christ. Tell a story. This is how we kind of engage with things, is through story. Cultivate hope. It's not all doom and gloom. There is a lot of things, a lot of groups are doing to care for the environment. Find that out. Share that. And also empower and inspire. How can you get involved? Right here in our local community, what can you do? What can you do when you walk out the door tonight? You could not eat meat tomorrow morning for breakfast. Pass on one meal a week. There, I just gave you something you can do, right? So these are things for environmental care. Evolution, environmental care. Those aren't the only two topics. There's more. This is a group of 18 to 25-year-olds. I'm not going to say it out loud, but I know what one of your topics is right now, front and center in your life, that you're wrestling with the church with. So what my desire is for us to dialogue. Don't label, you're not a Christian because you don't, whatever. Dialogue. Engage in conversation. Learn about it. Read about it. Talk to people with a different viewpoint than you and listen. Wow, how novel. Maybe you don't know everything there is to know about everything, right? It took me a long time to learn that. I got my little soapbox about this and you're just wrong. Well, I was wrong. So be willing to admit that. Yeah, that's my dialogue image. I want to thank Dr. John Lewis, Lipscomb University, the McClures. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm easy to find on the internet. I do have a book. I'm going to tell you this book. Okay. I've been talking about evolution for 20 years, and like somebody at church next to me, you know, I don't know, she's in marketing or whatever, and she'll say to me, well, can you just explain to me what evolution is? And I'm thinking in 4.5 minutes while we engage in this conversation, not really. So I've always wanted to have like a little pamphlet. Well, I found a theologian and a pastor and me. It's a 3-chapter book. That's it. And it's all Q&A. All the questions I've been asked, so I put a question in there, I answer it. There's another question I've heard, I answer it. There's a question I've heard, I answer it. There's a whole book. Then the pastor goes, questions he's heard about evolution faith, answered. It's a whole book. It's short. It's simple. I brought, I don't know, 12 or 15 with me. I think it's $20 on Amazon, which is too much money. We wanted to sell it for $6.99, but they wouldn't let us. We just want to get it out there for people. So if you would like one, I brought them with me. I really don't want to take them home on the plane. You can order one that way. Kindle's $3.99. It's cheaper than my $12 for hardback. So if you want more information about it, but there it is. So thank you so much, and we want to do questions.
Yeah, it's not a thick book. You could do this, like
It's really thin.
within the semester, like while you're also reading other stuff. Spring break, you want to get talking to people on the beach, PCB. You'll have people come up to you, I guarantee it. April, we're going to do a little Q&A. I'll start, and then we'll do some audience participation. So think of what you'd like to ask Dr. Cordero. One thing I'm interested in as somebody who is science-minded is what resources or things have helped you the most work through this theologically. A lot of people are okay with the science. The students in my capstone class are okay. They learn microbiology. They learn all the science. They're good with that. The hiccup usually comes when we start talking about us, right? When it's me. And then that brings up theological questions. So riff on that for a minute.
Yeah. I think the answer I don't like, but it's true, is it takes a really long time to learn about the stuff outside your field and kind of outside your interest. I can't read theologians' professional works. It's honestly just too hard. They have all this jargon and all this stuff they say, and they've got all these assumptions that I know, all the Bonhoeffer and who all these other people are. Like, I don't know who these people are. So I really struggle. And so what I would say is take your time and start by reading. There are books written for the lay audience. Like the John Walton book's great. Lost World of Adam and Eve is fantastic. There are books. There is now the BioLogos website, which didn't exist until like 2010. You can go on there and read short articles. You can ask a question. You can ask a question like, what about Genesis 1 and 2? And it will have a couple of articles about that. Greg, you've written articles in there. What have you written on?
Lay's book was Manifold Beauty of Genesis 1.
Yeah, Greg.
It's also thin.
Yeah. Greg Davidson has a great book on Genesis 1 that shows how multi-layered it is. And it's totally like a scientist like me can read it and get it. So that's out there.
Yeah, so I would say don't rush, don't do nothing. Somewhere in between, chip away slowly, learning little by little, and don't just read one side. Okay, be really quick. One of the activity I do, so I'm starting, the students already know me for 4 weeks, and now we're going to start talking about evolution. And I throw up on the screen a question, and they get their phones out. There's about 70 of them in my class, and I say, how much do you know about science and faith, evolution and faith? And they have choices, and like 80% of them say a lot. right? Then the next screen shows up, I get 3 columns of authors. I get a whole bunch of authors. They're just names, 3 columns of names. But I know that the first is all a 7-day creationists, the middle one is all intelligent design, and the far right one is all people that accept evolution, both Christians and non-Christians. And I go through a series of questions. How many have you heard? How many authors have you heard, 0 to 2, 4, blah, blah, blah. The next question, how many of you have read? How many authors have you read on the sheet? Third question, how many of you have read at least one from each column? Right? Then I let them know these are the columns, and then I put the question back up again, how much do you know about evolution of faith? And now I'm down there at like the 12%. I don't know very much, right? Because they've only ever read one thing. So spread out what you're reading so you understand the alternative view. Then you have all the information. And then the conversation, you can respect the person in their position. You can have hospitality towards them and allowing them to be them and you be you, right?
Yeah, great. Who has a question from the audience? Yeah, I'll bring you the mic.
In the beginning of your speech, you were talking about how you still have doubt. And is that all from evolution? What other scientific things give
I
you
doubt all the time. So I have a son, Tyler. He's 28, and I always say he has the gift of faith because his faith is amazing. Like, I so want his gift of faith. And so I always look at him, and then I say, well, I have the gift of doubt. Because I'm doubting all the time. But that's super healthy for me because as soon as I'm doubting, I immediately have to go look something up or talk to somebody in the know and figure out, yeah. So I doubt, is there really a God? Is this all fake? When I read about, okay, who are the people that put the Bible together? Like, why didn't they include these things? Why did they include those things? There's so many things, non-science things, that cause me to have doubt. And then there's other religions out there, so now I have doubt. There's just, doubt just seems to be in me. I am a Christian, and I have chosen intentionally to be a Christian, but I have to constantly remind myself, why am I a Christian? What is it I really believe? What are my pillars of faith? And knowing that and constantly challenging myself has, I think, made my faith real and deep and strong. I don't have somebody else's faith because they told me to believe this. I now own my own faith, and I think that's because I had doubt.
Yeah, that's great. Dean Holmes.
So I love the presentation for a lot of reasons, but
Thanks.
Early on you talked about this notion that I want you to unpack a little bit more about accepting the Bible on its own terms. Obviously, you know who C.S. Lewis is or was, and C.S. Lewis talks about coming back to a belief in God after he departed from folks who thought they knew it all. But he talked about coming back to belief in Christ later by accepting Christianity on its own terms and its own language. And so would you say more about how faith is this, in part, a journey to accept the stories of faith on their own terms?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the reasons I believe, so this is one of the reasons I believe is because women were the first people to say that there was nobody in the tomb. And at that time, women had zero clout. I mean, zero clout. And yet, in the Bible, they're the ones that got to spread that word. Well, that just couldn't be if there wasn't something mysteriously supernatural in that, in my mind. Right? So the stories, the things we hear, the information. Noah's Ark, okay, we sat down and I actually spent some time in that whole story. 4 months, and reading books and people's comments on it. And I'm like, ooh, there's a lot of little stories that were going around about Noah's Ark that really aren't here in the Bible. Anyone notice that? I'm sure we have a theologian or two in the room. So I think there's a lot to be said about what do I know because I've investigated in that with God, Holy Spirit, Jesus, praying, reading. And what do I know? Because I just was told by somebody. Like, I had a pastor, I don't go to that church anymore because I moved, but I loved him. He says, you shouldn't walk in the door without a Bible. You should have your Bible, because I'm standing up here telling you stuff, and you should not believe me. You should be looking in your Bible, and you should be reading what I'm reading to you to make sure I'm getting it right. That's taking the Bible on its terms, taking the science on its terms, figuring out it's for you. What do you know, and what do you believe? Does that kind of get it here?
That's great. Got time maybe for one more. Yeah, I'll take a student. All these old people asking questions.
Hey, I have a kind of long one. So I imagine being in the field that you're in, you're oftentimes met with hostility or defensiveness. How would you effectively communicate with those who are completely set in their way of thinking?
I don't. And here's what I mean by that. No, I'm serious. It's a perfectly good, because for a while I really did. And I'm like, it's this way. And they're like, it's this way. And where did we get? Nowhere. I left with my way and they left with their way, and we're nowhere. So what I started to learn to do is, if I'm engaging in a dinner conversation and you find out I'm an evolutionary biologist and I'm a Christian and you want to give me a really hard time about it, and I'm just going to listen and I'm going to nod and I'm going to ask you some questions. And that's it. Because, I'm picking on you, because she really doesn't want to know anything about what I have to share. She is not a place of open dialogue at all. And I'm really interested in how she landed there. And in my own mind, I'm thinking, is it fear? Is it how she grew up? Is it that she's tried it on for size and decided she's going to forefront a particular interpretation of the Bible this way, and like a super respectful position that I have for her, right? And so I'm like decided I'm just going to inquire about how she's where she is instead of get my agenda out. It took me 20 years to figure this out, though. I'm old. I'm 56. It took me a long time to realize that I have a lot to learn from her, and she doesn't have to learn from me. It's totally different when somebody starts asking me questions. But what I've come to learn is, after I let her do her thing, next time we see each other, she starts asking me questions. And it becomes safe for us to hear each other. Does that help? Thanks for letting me pick on you.
That's great. Let's thank April again. Yeah, so April's got some books. If you're interested in that, then come up front. There are also some light refreshments outside on the bottom floor of Ward if you'd like to do that. Thank you for coming tonight.